Next, we're going to have a discussion around data warehousing from Wayne Stiven, who is Enterprise Data Architect at Environment Canterbury. Wayne.
Awesome. Okay, hi everybody. It's good to be here and have a bit of a talk to you about, I guess, what ECan's up to in this space. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of sort of where we are, what the current state of data management and data warehousing is at ECan, and sort of where we're going in the future. I guess I don't pretend to have all the answers, but at least we do have a plan in place. So hopefully there's some good stuff in here. I guess there's probably two key takeaways from the talk today. Is the first one is it takes resourcing to do stuff like this. I guess that's the prime one. As you know, there's no free lunch around this area, so that takes employing professionals in the data space to do that. And also, I guess the second one is that, and this has been sort of mentioned in a number of the talks already, sort of data is sort of on an exponential sort of curve, and slightly new approaches to the traditional sort of data management and data warehousing. So different approaches sort of are required, especially going forward into the future. So I'll just get things underway here. There we go. Okay, so I guess the first question is, why is data management important at ECan? And some of these things have been sort of alluded to already in previous discussions this morning. But there's a number of, in a regional council sense, there's a number of sort of, I guess, national policy instruments that are affecting the way councils have to do business. And from an ECan perspective, there's a big one around water use. So we've got around 6,000 water takes in Canterbury, most of which have water meters and are all telemetered. So you've got a whole lot of 15-minute data or thereabouts coming in from all those water takes on a daily basis that needs to be managed well. There's also, Sean was alluding to this, around the nutrient management area, about 4,500 farms where there'll be farm plans required, there'll be nutrient loss data submitted to ECan. That's a very dependent on overseer, which many of you will know about, especially in regional councils. So there's a lot of work happening at ECan in that space at the moment, and how we harness that data, not make it onerous, and provide sort of good systems for people to use where appropriate. The other one, which has also been talked about a little bit, is the sort of video sensor data. So there's a whole lot of information coming into ECan now, and that's around sort of community groups, schools, places like that who want to do some air quality monitoring of their own. There's these little sensor devices now where people can just stand them up and collect information. So it's a question of, well, what do we do with that? I mean, if you talk to some of the science folks, it's got to be all QA'd, but then some of the stuff is actually really useful for sort of longer term trend analysis. How do we sort of cope with that? Obviously, there's requirements around central government. I won't sort of dwell too much on that because it's been covered already, and it's going to be covered again around sort of the EMaR, the NPS, NES, LAWA, etc. Obviously, data.gov.nz as well, which was also talked about. The other driver at ECan is a thing called the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, which is a very large program of work that sort of seeks to sort of, I guess, promote sustainable use of water in Canterbury while still achieving sort of water quality and water quantity outcomes. So there's a lot of work going on there with community groups all over the Canterbury region. So we need sort of good data management to sort of bookend that, I guess. There's also a science strategy at ECan, which promotes the idea of sort of a data hub, which again sort of feeds in nicely to the discussions already had, and the sort of demand for open data, and I'll cover that a little bit as we go on in the next slide or two. Okay, so some underlying sort of principles and benefits. Sort of first is that sort of good policy can achieve sort of optimised resource management, and that's underpinned by good data. Make use of technology in conjunction with third parties, so we're not trying to do everything ourselves, so we're trying to use vendors and engage with third parties. An example of that is around sort of water use here. We don't collect all the water use data around those 6,000 water takes that's done by third parties, and we receive data off them. And also we want to try to keep the focus pretty tight. So the scope on what we're trying to do, we're not trying to solve all the problems of the world here, just the sort of the immediate ones that can provide some deliverable outcomes at ECan. Some of the benefits, again, is sort of enabling external sort of innovation. So we've provisioned a lot of data out on our open data portal already, and that's been harnessed by a number of third parties that, in quite innovative ways, and I've got some examples of that as we go through. One of the key ones that's a big one for our commissioners and executive team is is to provide internal productivity improvements. So the idea is to free up your subject matter experts. So rather than taking requests for data and providing spreadsheets and emailing out, and both internally and externally, if we can provide some good sort of data tools where people can self-serve, that's the sort of the driver there. And the outcome of that was obviously providing a seamless sort of data reporting and dissemination. Okay, so some of the key elements of data management and dissemination, which is sort of going to be the next few slides, we'll cover this in detail. But I guess just to sort of, put a good bit of a framework around it, data management, obviously a data dictionary is very important. That's sort of where enables discovery through the metadata, so that's one of the elements that we're putting in place. Master data, which has been talked about a bit before, probably not one of the things that ECan's done well in the past, so that's providing sort of key data elements that are common across different data sets and providing a sort of a bit of a framework around that so it can be managed well. Quality data management, which Sean talked a little bit about that. Data warehousing, providing some sort of centralised database of our internal systems. And also integration between applications, which I'll cover in a little bit in a minute too. On the data dissemination side, obviously we want to provide an industry standard data hub that can integrate to data.gov, etc., LAWA as well. Federation, so that's what I was just referring to, and also bring in CRI partners like NIWA, Landcare, etc., around sort of data federation. Some standardised reporting, and one of the big things that we really struggle with is sort of linking data to published documents. So we've got published documents that refer to data. Well, it's not always easy to link that, so that's one of the other elements that we're trying to provide a solution around. So ECan signed up to obviously the open and transparent government, NZ goal, all that sort of stuff that was talked about before, that Paul was talking about in his talk. And that includes sort of all captured data at ECan, all created data, so outputs for modelling and so on, and anything that we commission. There's caveats on that depending on which organisation is doing the commissioning for you. So sometimes it can be a little bit of a struggle, but that's essentially what we're talking about. So all data that ECan has will be made open unless there's a reason not to around privacy and those usual sort of things. So how do we use data? So obviously multiple source systems across on the left there. So science, operational, financial, regulatory, planning. So there's data sources in all those key areas. And this is again, Sean had a slide on this, sort of copying him in kind around the whole data to information knowledge thing. So we're taking raw data. An example would be, water use at a consent. We can aggregate that so we get sort of information around what's happening in a particular zone or a particular catchment, and then obviously the information knowledge is around sort of reporting analysis of are the outcomes being achieved. So I've got a sort of an example on the bottom of a water level data life cycle, which again similar to what sort of Sean's described around sort of water level data. Ratings are applied to that to create flow data, so we're sort of starting to turn it into information. We both have internal and external users of that. External around recreational, commercial safety, internal around monitoring and modelling, and it obviously ends up in good decision making around the knowledge side of things. So it was just a bit of a caption there. So where's ECan in relation to all these sort of lofty goals of what we want to try to achieve? Well, this is something I plagiarised off the internet, as you do. Thankfully, I've not put us at the chaotic stage down the bottom there. So it's a bit of a roadmap, and some of the stuff around the predictive are pretty sort of lofty goals, I'd have to say. But you know, I think we've nudged up a bit from the reactive stage. So we've got some standards established. We've got some basic data quality management processes. We've got a master data plan, and we're starting to move out around the organisation to sort of pull all that in. So if you Google the data management maturity, you'll come up with that one there. So, okay, so this is a bit of a key one. Yeah, probably feeding into Sean's sort of dirty laundry sort of talk. So this is sort of a bit of a current state dirty laundry. So at the moment, I think this hopefully might gel with a number of you. We've got multiple source systems on the left. We do have a data warehouse in place, which a lot of that source system data flows into. But our data dissemination is a little bit all over the place, as you can see there. So you've got external data requests that might, you know, come from members of the public or organisations, and they could go through subject matter experts. They might go straight to an individual inside a council. So there's the productivity sort of hit at that stage. They could come via their website. They could come to some of the data services we've got, or they could come through our sort of geospatial portal via Canterbury Maps. But all those sort of data dissemination points, some of them talk directly to source systems, and some of them talk to data warehouses, and that's just been the legacy of time, really, of how things have developed. So obviously that's not ideal, because potentially you could ask for the same bit of data in two places and get a different answer. So that's obviously not ideal. So that's my sort of little dirty laundry slide. So obviously this is where we want to get to. So sort of, I guess, the polar opposite of that, where we can settle on one sort of data warehouse, document management store linked. Data dissemination is handled through website, data services, Canterbury Maps, all talking to the one source, Canterbury Maps being our geospatial sort of portal. And subject matter experts can be hopefully left out of the loop and get on with more add value work. So obviously they would use the data warehouse for their own internal analysis and reporting, but they wouldn't hopefully be as involved in as many external data requests taking up their time. So this is sort of our overall high-level sort of goal that we're sort of trying to drive some productivity gains and sort of better data sort of management around. So it's sort of a data-centric sort of view of the world. Okay, so I put this slide in yesterday, and it might be a little bit techy, so I won't dwell on it too much in detail, but I guess the point of the slide was trying to illustrate that there's sort of been a traditional data warehousing approach, and then there's sort of a more modern one. And that more modern approach has sort of come out of the fact that there's a lot of new data these days. So 85% of data comes from new data sources, according to Gartner, and that's around sensors, RFID tags, GPS, you name it. There's lots of data out there to consume, and a lot of it's doesn't all fit in a nice relational sort of database sort of model of times gone by. So there's slightly different approaches to be taken there, where at the bottom are sort of traditional data sources of nice internal stuff sitting on internal servers, and we can sort of arrange things nicely and have good governance over all that. Where now you've got a lot of this non-relational stuff that we still want to harness to provide information and reporting, well, we have to take a slightly different approach to it. So I won't go into too much of the techie side of that, but I think it's just a point worth noting. Okay, so just going through sort of the things that we currently do. So we've got a data service at data.ecan.gov.nz. So it's a bit of a screenshot of that on the bottom left there. So that's where you can go to sort of either download or integrate groundwater information. So we've got a lot of data sets up there now. That was sort of a homegrown initiative as a bit of a trial balloon to see what we could do. So there's a project on at the moment to migrate this platform to an open source or industry standard sort of platform, probably to a ECan type of platform. The key there is that in this here, that provides every data set provides a URL that you can integrate to. So if someone comes in and they want to get access to water information, they can actually just plagiarise that URL and integrate it into their app or their whatever reporting solution they want. And that's fully open. We don't ask any questions or anything like that. The other example I've got on the right there is a bus timetables application. So this is actually a global one. So we have all of our real-time information for the passenger transport network in Christchurch online. So it's basically where every bus is at any given time around the city. And so this Transit Times Plus application harnesses that data and displays it. And there's about 3 or 4 of them that do it. So we didn't promote that or tell them how to do it or what to do. It just happened and suddenly they were using the data. So it's just a good illustration of how by making data available, all sorts of things happen that you never envisioned. And this sort of ties into that theme that I was talking about before around making data available provides the opportunity for innovation and economic sort of growth that probably a lot of us wouldn't even think of. So that's one of the sort of key aspects there. So the next point of dissemination is Canterbury Maps. So I want to give this a decent plug, especially to the regional and district councils down here. So Canterbury Maps is sort of a collaborative effort between Environment Canterbury and all the district councils in the region, including Christchurch City Council. So they all contribute financially to it. So it's one GIS platform online that makes all the data that's on that platform available as services. And there's also a number of different viewers there. It's also is a collaborative effort around aerial photography capture. So again, under that banner, there's a rolling imagery capture program across the Canterbury region on every year. So I think this year the northern part of the Canterbury region is being all captured over the summer. And so that's on a sort of rolling basis. So that's co-funded. We've got dedicated resourcing to that. So we've got two FTEs dedicated to Canterbury Maps, and again, that's co-funded. So even though the Canterbury Maps platform is hosted at ECan, well via our cloud hosting partner, but essentially via ECan, it's a collaborative effort. So it's been a real step up, especially for some of the smaller district councils in the Canterbury region, because they can actually, get access to sort of services and and a lot of data and facilities that they wouldn't have been able to before. So that's been a real good thing. I think one of our guys did a bit of a talk in Cromwell a few weeks ago to all the CEOs of in Otago Southland, and this was one of the key themes about an initiative around like Canterbury Maps. So that's in the geospatial sort of area. The other one is the sort of the ECan website. So again, this is sort of a slight dirty laundry slide. So we've got a lot of data on our website because the website came before the data warehouse. So a lot of this is talking directly to source systems. So part of the project that we've got underway is to realign all this. And that goes through to various document management systems and so on. I won't dwell on that slide because otherwise I'll steal others' thunder, other than the fact that obviously LAWA, EMaR initiatives are one of the key data dissemination focuses for us at the moment, and providing that data up there in an integratable sort of fashion. So as a result, what do we do about it? So data management's been made a top priority by the ECan commissioners, and doing it right costs money. So we got dedicated LTP, long-term plan resourcing around data management. So that went through the full LTP cycle. We established a data governance group, which is sort of across the various sections in the council. So we've got representatives on the data governance group. We've got a data management team established. So we've got two BI professionals, a senior data management analyst and data architect, and so they're dedicated roles to work across ECan, so they don't reside in one particular section. It's cross council, and they're all IT professionals. So we've got all these recruits are from the private sector. So we're not moving internal decks around or anything like that. These are external data professionals. The other key there is we want to take sort of a COTS or an open source commercial off-the-shelf or open source solution. So we don't want to do, the key is we don't want to be doing internal development. That comes into the sustainability thing that Sean was mentioning before about when people move on or there's restructures. And I think that's probably one of been the follies of some of local government through the years. A lot of it's relied on one person with that institutional knowledge who knows, who knows what they know. So our general theme is it has to be vendor supportable. So we can rely on both internal and external people to support whatever solution we put in place. So some of the principles of the project. Some of the phases of what we're doing. First phase, we've got a sort of a push on our data warehouse to get that aligned, get the best design for it. So the whole discussion around time series data comes into that, and how best to provision that in a data warehouse sense. We need the alignment of our GIS data to the data warehouse, and then obviously the development of a solution, which is sort of underway. Sort of a data management sort of push, so that's sort of developing the data governance framework, which is sort of underway, reviewing all our data sets, and basically getting cross-council agreement with the various data stewards in each of the domain areas across the council, and then implementing sort of master data, metadata, data quality where appropriate. Some parts of ECan do data management really well, and others don't. So it's a bit of a mix and match. Some are better than others. And then the whole open data sort of federation. So looking for sort of open data solutions. What we ultimately want to do is to expand the Canterbury Maps initiative to be Canterbury Data. So really, there's sort of one and the same thing. One's geospatial, one's not. But really, there's a little difference these days. So what we want to do is take that collaborative approach with other district councils in the region around sort of open data and data pools. So that's a long game. So it's a number of years to do that. And I think just to wrap up, I've just sort of popped up some resources there. I think it's worth having a look at ccan.org. So that's sort of probably the top open data sort of portal around at the moment. It's open source, but it's sort of used by the US government, European, Aussie, most Aussies on it. So there's various flavours of that you can get. It can be hosted, it can be on-premise, all that sort of stuff. Obviously data.gov.nz, and then it'd be worth having a perusal at the Canterbury Maps as well and have a look at what's there. There's various sort of GIS themes on there that you can get specific viewers that have got pre-canned data loaded into them, or there's a whole sort of data discovery mechanism in there as well, which sort of leads you down that sort of open data sort of portal idea in terms of geospatial. So I think that's me, Colin.
Thank you. Any questions?
How's it going? Jim from Digital Stock. Just in regard to, you said, talking about conventional data storage versus kind of the new way, which I thought was a really cool slide. I know you didn't elaborate on that much because it was probably a bit technical, but I was quite curious. And also you mentioned kind of around how you're storing your data, and you mentioned a cloud solution. I found often using that word as kind of, it's a bit of a dirty word. People kind of are a bit afraid by it. The word cloud means many things, and I was wondering how you're managing storing and kind of those data warehousing, and what solutions you're using for that.
Yep. So it's a good question, and especially it's still probably not fully resolved at the moment. But in our world, so all of our we've got a full infrastructure as a service through Rivera, which is now Spark, I think, essentially. So essentially we have a cloud provider anyway, and Rivera are putting in place a Azure-like approach as well. So essentially what that means is that the idea of having on-premise databases and servers and all that tin and looking after it becomes a thing of the past, and it's ultimately scalable. So that gets you around your sort of issues of size, speed, and all that sort of thing. So we're in that space already, and it's, even though it's, to be frank, it was expensive to do, but I think the long-term benefits are there. So that's sort of our approach to that. I think the other thing, the other point around that, we've just been doing some trials and testing with some community groups around. I mentioned the air quality sensor idea, and providing sort of an Azure database sort of solution around that. So that's sort of the cloud-hosted data. So helping community groups put in sensors where they can measure air quality, and that data gets piped straight into the cloud, and then we can just harness that and through the various mechanisms that I outlined. Yeah.
How big is the team, across GIS management?
Probably about 10, 15, 12, something like that. Yep. I think we're making use of a lot of consultants and contractors, which Colin knows about, to help us in this space as well, to get a good uplift. So various BI consultancies as well. But yeah, 10 to 12 without having thought of counting them all up specifically. So, but there's been 6 new full-time equivalent positions that have gone through our LTP and been approved in the space generally, that covers both spatial and the data management. So yeah, so quite a big deal from a headcount point of view, and getting it past those various gates you've got to go through. Yeah. Yep.
One more question.
Yep.
How do you go about designing your data warehouse? What it is, what it's not, etc. What was the process you went through?
Yeah, well, so it's something that was there's been a couple of cracks at it in the past over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So about 3 years ago, before I sort of came back to ECan, they had a contractor in for the best part of a year, developing a traditional data warehouse, SQL Server-based data warehouse, ETL, the whole shitting box. So that was done with probably not a lot of design to begin with. He essentially launched into it. It is pretty fully functional. So what we're doing right now is we're using a BI consultant to help us do a review of that to see if it's still fit for purpose. There's a number of things popped out of that we need to change, and so that's part of that work stream that's ongoing. So I don't think we've got quite the design right, and I think one of the areas that we are rethinking, and I've been talking to sort of Mark Rogers a bit about this as well, especially around time series data and the data warehousing approach to that. So that's pretty analogous, really. Time series data, if you take away the sort of regional council aspect to it, it's ubiquitous across all sorts of industry around SCADA type of stuff. So there's a lot of solutions around, if you look a little bit wider than just a council perspective on how you best handle time series data. So we're still doing some preliminary design work on that, on the best approach. And I don't have an outcome for that, but I think the only sort of based on that, or basis other than that, is that probably that traditional data warehousing ETL approach isn't appropriate for time series data, would be what my basic feeling is, but our actual design we haven't materialised yet. So does that help? Yep.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.